Morning, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Anthony's Journey. So last time we talked about my first year at EY or Ernest & Young, and also the purchase of my first house. So there was a lot we talked about in my last episode, and yeah, let's dive right into the next piece of the journey. So now, as I discussed a little bit in my last episode, I was kind of feeling a little bit worn out from working at EY because I was working 80, sometimes to 100 hours a week. I was effectively, not at home with my family anymore. I was eating dinner with my colleagues. I was working weekends. It was definitely a bit of a grind, not just physically, but mentally as well. I also felt like I couldn't go to the gym. I couldn't really do much, in all honesty, while I was working at EY. So, later in my career, this was around 2018, I decided that I wasn't going to do this anymore. So I actually gave my 2-week notice to EY, noting that I didn't want to continue the grind anymore of working so many hours, not seeing my family, not seeing my friends. And it was a tough decision because it took so much effort just to make it to EY, but I knew that in the long run it was going to be the right decision. And something else that I just wanted to note while I was in EY as well was that I was actually trying to do my last CPA exam. I was trying to do audit, which was the last one that I was working towards, and I wasn't even able to do that. I took the exam 3 times and I just didn't really feel the energy like I used to. I failed the exam 3 times. I just didn't really feel like, I just couldn't, I really didn't really have time for anything. I didn't have even time to study really. So I tried to take the exam, I try to, just wing it, and it just didn't work out for me overall. It was definitely a tough time for me overall, and I was severely depressed, and it just made me feel that there was nothing else to live for, kind of thing, in that sense. So afterwards, after I gave my 2-week notice at EY, I actually started interviewing at another company called Trade Supply Group. It was a company that specializes in construction materials, and specifically in the Hamptons. They had a storefront in the Hamptons, and they also had a storefront here in Chinatown as well in New York. So it felt like a great opportunity to go back into the private market. And overall, I was still dealing with the purchase of a new home, kind of like figuring out like what I'm going to do with that. So I felt like I didn't want to have like a lag in my employment. So I decided to take the dive and just go into this new venture. So I think it was a great decision overall. I was earning 10,000 more than I was in my last job. So overall, it was a great move. I was hopefully not going to be working as many hours. So I said, yeah, let's dive right into it. So I got the job at Trade Supply Group after interviewing, and I said goodbye to EY. And I said, wow, this is it. It's all over for me now at EY, and now I'm starting my new position here at Trade Supply Group. So once I actually got settled into Trade Supply Group, I had a really great manager. His name was Kevin. He was a great manager. I really enjoyed talking to him. He really was someone who understood the grind of working in a Big Four, and he made me feel at home. The first couple of months, I took it pretty easy. I started to learn the ropes of like, hey, how do you scan your checks? How do you deposit these checks? How do you account for reconciliations? How do you call up vendors for AP invoices? How to go reach out to clients for customer collections? It was definitely a whole 180 spin from when I was in EY. It was more kind of learning the day to day than trying to always take care of how many hours am I doing, working work papers, working in a high stress environment. It was a lot more chill, and I really enjoyed that. Especially in the first couple of months, I talked to my manager and I said, hey, I really have this last exam that I really want to take, which was audit. And also I was approaching the 18-month window of when it was going to expire. And he actually told me hey, take 2 weeks off. Just don't worry about work. Just focus on getting that last exam out, and just really focusing. So I took those words to heart, and I actually like took those 2 weeks that he gave me, and this was actually funny enough at the beginning of my job. He gave me 2 weeks to actually study for my last exam. I was taking the audit exam, as I mentioned, and I really gave it my all. I studied as hard as I could. I kept the study. I kept studying, and then in a miraculous turn of events, I passed the exam. Like, I passed the final CPA exam. I woke up that morning. I was yelling. I was crying. I was like, "Mom, I did it!" Like, I was so over the moon. I was so ecstatic. I was like, wow. So I finally got like all 4 exams out of the way. After the 4th attempt of trying to pass this audit exam, and I did it. I finally got it out of the way, and I couldn't thank my manager more for giving me the opportunity to actually to sit down and actually study for this thing. So, things were going great overall. I really enjoyed my new position. It was definitely learning the ropes slowly, learning how to do commissions, for example, learning how to record things properly, doing reconciliations. Everything was going great. After a couple of months, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with the first house that I purchased. I was, on the fence. My mom was telling me at first that hey, maybe she wanted to move into it. But then my dad was kind of against it. He was like, hey, I don't want to move all the way down here. I'm on our own. I want to still be in Brooklyn. I still want to be in NYC, and I just want to live there. So, it was definitely a tough decision on what we wanted to do. But after a little bit of back and forth, we actually decided that we were going to rent it. We, at first I was I wasn't really sure about it. I was like, hey, maybe we don't rent it. Because what if we really want to move there? Really, this house was meant for you. But after a lot of pondering and thinking about our current financial position, where I was still technically in debt on this house, we decided that renting for at least for some time would be the best course of action. So after kind of looking at the market, kind of understanding what would be the best position we could be in, we decided that we would rent the house at $1,500. And it's funny enough, our mortgage payment wasn't much at that time. I think our mortgage payments were around $1,100, $1,200 a month. So it actually ended up working out in the sense of at least it covered our mortgage, and it was $1,500. But at the same time, I was like, hey, how the heck do I find a tenant? So we actually went out and we looked online, and we actually found that you can actually get something called a property management company. So the property management company that I use currently is called Marketplace Homes, and they're a great company in the sense of cost-wise, they don't really cost much. The only thing is in terms of the showings, they will have the showings done virtually, so they'll do a lockbox feature where the tenant would put in the code or use the key and get into the property on their own and kind of tour the property on their own. So that's the only thing. And if you wanted someone who would effectively tour the property, the cost would be a lot higher monthly, and of course to manage the property. So I think overall we made the correct decision of using Marketplace Homes. We found an amazing tenant. She was in the Army, and she was a great tenant. She actually signed a 3-year lease, and she was there most of the time. I just to let everyone know, she was there for almost the whole 3 years before she was relocated. But yeah, she was a great tenant. She always made her payments on time, and she ended up working out very well. So yeah, she was our first tenant. We were starting to rake in the money, and it was great. But then, something actually happened at work.
Hello everyone, my name is Anthony, and I'm the host of TheLostSanctuary. I hope you've been enjoying our content so far, and if you have, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, we have our website up here, and we also have some socials down here. And as always, leave your comments down below.
Something that was happening at my current job was that my boss actually decided to find another position. So he found another position at another, I think it was a tire company to my understanding. Yeah, he found a position in a tire company, and I was very distraught because he was the one who interviewed me. I had a great time with him. I would say he was understanding of my mental health of coming out of public accounting, so he took it very easy on me. The workload was pretty light. It was, he helped me study. He allowed me to take time for my CPA exam. I felt so great having him as a manager. He was very caring, and I enjoyed having him there. But then, we all have to move on at one point, so I understand where he was coming from. So he decided to, move on to the tire company, and then afterwards I had a new manager, which I won't say that this new manager was bad in any regard, but I felt like there's two kinds of managers. There's a manager that will, get their hands dirty and actually do things, and there's managers that will effectively give you all their work and then kind of just cruise on by. So she was the type of manager that effectively gave me all of her work, and she herself, I would say, wouldn't really do much, at least from what I saw. She would sometimes be wandering around the office, and sometimes not. At least I didn't really see much being done, sadly. So I was working a 40-hour week, a full 40-hour week. Sometimes I would have to go to our Long Island office and kind of go there and kind of do things. But as the months went by, I kind of saw like my workload gradually increasing, and I was actually talking to my old manager at one point. I was like, hey, like, is this normal to be like getting this much work? And he was very like frank with me. He was like, yeah, like I was kind of shielding you from all this work, but now that I'm no longer there, you actually have to do that level of work. Like you were, at first you were, you were taking it a little bit easy, but normally I was working 60 to 80 hours a week just to do my job. And I was like, wow. I thought that I had escaped the grind of like working so many hours, especially on a fixed salary, and it was I was just so sad, because I was like, wow. So I went from one kind of like toxic environment to another toxic environment, in the sense of just having to work so many hours. So after like a couple of months, I couldn't really I just couldn't stand it anymore. I was kind of like just out of it, and I didn't even feel like coming into work anymore. It was a very bad feeling. I've never felt that, even when I was in EY. Like I felt pretty bad, but I never felt bad to this extent where I felt like I was kind of lied to, in the sense of, hey, like this is not what I signed up for overall. Like I thought that when I went to the private sector it wouldn't be this bad, but yeah, it was horrible. Like my new manager just didn't feel like, it didn't even feel like like they cared at all. Like they were just like, hey, just do all the work and just shut up and do it, kind of thing. And I after a while I said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I just kind of checked out. At that time I didn't know that I was doing it, but there's a term called quiet quitting, which basically means you just do the bare minimum and then just to sustain yourself. And I tried that for a bit, but I was falling, of course, behind on all of my work. And then at one point I was just let go, because, and it's funny, when I was let go, it felt like such a sigh of relief. I felt that it was finally the escape I needed from just being in this grind just for so long, almost like 2 years. And I took some time for myself, and it wasn't much time, to be honest. I maybe took like a month or two. And at that time we actually just got a puppy. He was only 2 weeks old. His name is Rolly, and we also got Bingo, which is my other puppy. We effectively took in 2 puppies, and it was a good time. Like I actually spent those 2 months just taking care of my puppies. They were only 2 weeks old at the time, so we gave them formula, and it was a great time. It was definitely a great escape from work. And of course, I didn't give up on searching, so I actually reached out to a company called Robert Half, who found me the first job, funny enough. And then I reached out to them again, and I was like saying like, hey, can you help me out with like maybe another job, because like this one didn't really work out too well. At first there wasn't really much going on. Most people, with my history, they were just like, hey, like he might be too overqualified for this, or he might not want to stay here. So I was kind of feeling I didn't really have a job at the time, but I was using my savings to pay off the mortgage, and of course the rental money that was coming in was good too. But at the same time, I didn't want to pay off the mortgage more quickly, because of course the interest was pretty high at that time. So I was kind of distraught for a while. But then around October of 2018, we actually got a call from Robert Half themselves, and they were like, hey, would you be interested in being a consultant for us? And I said, I've never done consulting work myself, so it was something that I didn't really know what I should do. But yeah, I took a chance. Funny enough, I actually had to interview at Robert Half, which is I wasn't expecting to be interviewed by a recruiting firm, for a consulting position. But hey, there's a lot of things out there that we don't know that organizations do. So sometimes recruiting firms even have a consulting division, which I didn't know that. So yeah, so I went through a few rounds of interviews, and one of the questions that came up during the interview, which I will never forget, is like, why should we hire you when your last employer actually said that you weren't doing a good job? And I always remember that. And I said, like, hey, like, I just want to let you know that, even though I wasn't doing a good job, at least to her standards, I was doing as much as I could. There was just so much work tossed at me. It was essentially like I felt like I was being pushed out, which I know doesn't sound great to say, but it was effectively I was like given too much work, and it was it broke my mental, it impacted my mental health very heavily, and it was just not the right environment for me. So, but if you give me the right environment, I do work very hard and I do my best, as long as people treat me right, and that's kind of like what I said. And the interview was a little bit kind of surprised at my response, but at the end of the day, I did get the job though. I got the job as a consultant, and I started to actually. So I thought that the interview process was done in there, just done. But actually, the way the consulting program works at Rubber Half is that not only do you have to interview to become a consultant, but you actually have to interview again at your clients or your potential clients' job as well. So essentially, I started to interview at a couple of clients, and they even gave me like a test day where I would like work a day or two with them. And the first one was actually like a housing, like a public housing organization. That one didn't work out too well. I didn't really like it. Then I tried working at another construction firm. That I didn't really like that one either. But then I landed at one more company. They were called Watermark Insights. So they're an education software company. Basically, to give you guys some context, what their software does is they measure how well the students are perceiving the education. Sometimes they'll work on surveys with the students at the end of the semester, and it will be organized by Watermark Insights to kind of gauge how well the college is preparing students and how well they're actually doing in their studies. So yeah, so I actually worked with Watermark Insights for a good week, and on a trial basis. And at first I was like, I was doing the best I could, with the knowledge that I did have, considering, I was only a staff accountant at the time. So I didn't really have a lot of knowledge to begin with, between like being staff most of the time when I was in EY, and then a staff again here when I was, I was kind of like a financial analyst, but at the same time, I just didn't feel like I didn't really do much staff or senior level work. Like I did mostly staff, not really senior level work, if I'm making sense. But, after the trial week, the controller of the company, he really liked me. And I ended up working at Watermark Insights. So it was a crazy time. I was working for EY for a couple of months. Then I started working for Trade Supply Group for a couple of months, took a break. And then, of course, went to my place. And then finally got a job at Watermark Insights as a consultant. So it was a crazy year overall. But, it was definitely a great time. And, of course, we passed our CPA exam. So it was definitely a year to remember. I'm not going to lie. 2018 was a really crazy year for me. So, yeah. All right. And that's going to conclude Anthony's Journey, episode 11. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing an amazing job. And I'm wishing everyone out there all the best. All right. Until next time. Adios.